Recap: Alchemy Emperor of the Divine Dao, Chapter 953. Chapter: Beneath the Furious Vault of Heaven, where thunder roared like ancient war drums and lightning tore the sky into jagged fragments. Ling Han stood at the very center of destruction, his body shattered, his very bones reduced to fragments, drifting within a storm of divine punishment. Yet, within that chaos, his will burned unyielding. He silently circulated the indestructible heaven's scroll, guiding its profound technique through what remained of his existence. Piece by piece, fragment by fragment, his godly bones began to reform. This was no simple recovery. It was destruction, reborn into creation, a tempering that refined his very essence and elevated it to a higher plane. But such rebirth came at a price. Pain. Unimaginable pain. Though Ling Han possessed the miraculous, indestructible true fluid, he did not dare use it now. The heavenly tribulation itself had to wash away every impurity, forging his bones through divine lightning until they approached the strength of level 2 godly metal. Any interference would ruin this rare opportunity. And so, he endured. Every strike of lightning was like a blade carving into his soul. Every moment stretched into eternity. The agony surged so violently that even Ling Han, whose will was as firm as iron, felt the faint urge to simply let go, to dissolve into nothingness. Yet he did not fall. At his level of cultivation, his spirit alone could sustain his existence even as his body was destroyed. But for any ordinary cultivator, such devastation would have meant instant death. Body shattered, soul extinguished. Not far away, 6 figures watched from the sidelines, their gazes cold and calculating. "Oh no, this brat failed to pass the tribulation and died," one of them exclaimed, though there was not the slightest trace of sorrow in his voice. Indeed, their disappointment stemmed from greed, not sympathy. If Ling Han truly perished here, his secrets, his profound techniques, would vanish with him, forever out of reach. And more importantly, with the heavenly tribulation still raging, none of them dared step forward. To interfere was to invite heaven's wrath upon themselves. But then a voice cut through their assumptions. "That's not right. If he's dead, why hasn't the tribulation dispersed?" The group froze. "That's right. A tribulation vanishes the moment its target dies." Their eyes sharpened, locking once more onto the storm's center. "This brat, he's still alive." A flicker of excitement returned. Hey, good. If he lives, then once this is over, he'll be crippled beyond recovery. With his body shattered like that, killing him will be effortless. They spoke with absolute confidence, for no cultivator, no matter how powerful, emerged from a heavenly tribulation unscathed. Even the mightiest beings in the Genesis tier dared not boast of passing such trials unharmed. Every tribulation demanded a heavy toll. And so, they waited. Time passed. 4 hours slipped by beneath the thunder's relentless fury. At last, within the storm's heart, Ling Han's godly bones completed their transformation. The indestructible heaven scroll surged once more, guiding the final phase, restoration. Bone fragments fused, reshaped, and solidified, now gleaming with a strength comparable to level 2 godly metal. His skeletal frame had ascended, its quality refined to a new level. Then came flesh. Blood and sinew regrew at a visible pace, weaving themselves around the reforged bones. Life surged back into his form, and his body rapidly reconstructed itself from ruin. With a sliver of attention freed, Ling Han extended his will outward. He began to actively absorb the lightning. This time, he sought not survival, but refinement. The body of lightning stirred once more as he drew in the power of the thunder. Yet almost immediately he sensed something lacking. The absorption stalled. It was not that his physique was insufficient. No, his body could withstand far greater power. The limitation lay elsewhere. The thunderclap 9th heaven. This mystical power, once formidable, now revealed its limits. In the immortal realm, it was ordinary. Ling Han's brows furrowed slightly. Even when he had first stepped into the immortal level, he had already felt its inadequacy. Now, that realization became undeniable. He shook his head faintly. The same applied to the 3 styles of black origin. Though once mighty, it originated from the Heaven's Sword Palace, a sect whose strongest expert had only reached the Sun-Moon tier. Its potential had a ceiling, a bottleneck that could not be surpassed. Techniques not born from one's own Dao would always encounter such limits. At that moment, Ling Han could not help but feel a trace of admiration. The Rain Emperor, a man who had forged his own path, creating the Son of Heaven fist technique. With every increase in cultivation, his technique would evolve alongside him, growing endlessly stronger. Of course, such a path was anything but easy. Then, Wang, golden light flickered within Ling Han's mind. Characters unfolded like ancient scriptures, shifting and rearranging. Some formed words, others transformed into vivid images. A new technique emerged, annihilating Dragon Star Arrow. No, not the one he had known before. This was its true form, an archery art that could annihilate dragons with a single arrow, that could shatter galaxies with one shot. Only now, having stepped into the immortal level, did Ling Han possess the qualification to comprehend it. This technique had no fixed stance, no rigid form. It was a method, a supreme method that gathered every ounce of power within the body and condensed it into a single arrow, an unstoppable strike that could slay gods and Buddhas alike. Before this moment, it had remained hidden, waiting for him to ascend. Now it revealed itself. A faint smile curved Ling Han's lips. Above him, the heavenly tribulation began to fade. The storm weakened. The lightning dwindled. The black clouds that had blotted out the sky started to disperse, retreating into the crimson heavens from which they had come. The final bolt of lightning descended. And with it, the trial ended. Ling Han had passed. He had truly stepped into the immortal realm. Forming mountains and rivers was merely a sign of entering the mountain river tier, but only by surviving the tribulation could one claim true success. The sky cleared, and at that very instant, shoo! Shoo! 6 figures shot forward like arrows, surrounding Ling Han in a tight formation. Their eyes gleamed with cold intent. You've got guts, daring to refine our mountain river stone? But after that tribulation, you must be riddled with injuries. Even if you used spiritual herbs to force recovery, your foundation must be unstable. Hand yourself over. We'll grant you a swift death. Their voices dripped with arrogance. They had every reason to be confident. All 6 were cultivators of the low extreme of the mountain river tier. 2 stood at its peak, 3 at the late stage, and 1 at the middle stage. Moreover, the 2 at the peak were 1-star geniuses, their battle prowess rivaling the early stage of the medium extreme against a newly advanced cultivator. Victory seemed inevitable. Ling Han simply smiled. There was even a trace of excitement in his eyes. "I've been a punching bag for far too long," he said lightly. "Now, it's finally my turn." He stretched his arms as if loosening stiff muscles. "Come then. Will you fight one by one, or all together?" The group stiffened. "Arrogant. You think stepping into the immortal level makes you invincible?" "Shi Hao. Go. Fine." A young man stepped forward, his movements casual, almost dismissive. He raised a hand and pressed it down toward Ling Han. Wang, behind him, a phantom of mountains and rivers appeared, suspended in the air. Divine patterns shimmered across their surfaces, radiating power. Though he was only at the late stage of the low extreme, the manifestation of his mountain river proved he was taking this seriously. He might look relaxed, but he dared not be careless. After all, Ling Han stood on the same tier. Ling Han's eyes sharpened slightly. He, too, lacked a clear understanding of his own strength. And so, he responded in kind. With a single thought, his mountain river emerged. The moment it appeared, pooh! The remaining 5 burst into laughter. It was tiny, absurdly small. Compared to theirs, Ling Han's mountain river looked like a mere puddle beside a vast river. Their earlier caution vanished instantly. With such a foundation, he has no future. Even Shi Hao smirked faintly. He had been overly cautious. This opponent had just broken through. How strong could he really be? Then, pang! Their fists met. For a single heartbeat, everything froze. Then, Shi Hao's arm rippled unnaturally, like soft dough struck by overwhelming force. A sharp crack echoed as bone pierced through flesh, bursting out from his shoulder. The exposed bone gleamed with a crystalline luster, stained with blood that clung to it like beads of red agate, refusing to fall. Silence. Absolute silence. The 5 spectators blinked, again and again, as if trying to dispel an illusion. Had they seen it wrong? Wasn't Shi Hao supposed to crush Ling Han with ease? Yet, no matter how they blinked, the scene remained unchanged. A chill ran down their spines. They inhaled sharply, their expressions turning rigid with disbelief. What kind of strength was this? What kind of body could shatter a mountain river tier cultivator's arm with a single punch? Ah! Shi Hao finally reacted. Pain surged through him like a tidal wave. and he staggered back, his face twisted in horror. This power. His voice trembled. This is not something a cultivator in the low extreme could possess. The others exchanged glances, their earlier arrogance completely gone. Early stage of the medium extreme, or perhaps even stronger. The air grew heavy, and for the first time, they realized they were not hunting prey. They had awakened a monster. In that tense moment, the air seemed to thicken, as though even the winds of the mystery realm had paused to witness what was about to unfold. The 6 cultivators stood in rigid formation, their expressions grave, their eyes locked onto Ling Han as though he were no longer a man, but a storm waiting to be unleashed. They understood one thing with terrifying clarity. There was a vast, unbridgeable difference between power and battle prowess. Among them, Yu Lihui and Wu Fu stood as prime examples. Both were 1-star geniuses, standing proudly at the peak of the low extreme. Their combat strength could rival ordinary cultivators who had just stepped into the medium extreme. Yet, their raw power remained shackled at the low extreme. Power was merely one pillar of battle strength, but it was the foundation upon which all else stood. And now, Ling Han's raw power alone had already stepped into the early stage of the medium extreme. If that was only his foundation, then what monstrous height would his full battle prowess reach when all his techniques were unleashed? A chill crept into their bones. This man had only just stepped into the Mountain River tier. 4-star genius? Or something even more terrifying? 5-star? A faint smile slowly curved upon Ling Han's lips, calm yet filled with quiet satisfaction. This was the fruit of his relentless tempering. His decision to push his cultivation to the absolute limit of 20 stars in the Shattering Void tier before ascending. Now that effort had blossomed into overwhelming strength. Even without techniques, his power alone had reached the level of a 4-star genius. And if he layered upon it his Eye of Truth, his 3 styles of black origin, and the countless mystical arts within his grasp, just how far could he rise? His eyes gleamed with excitement. "Come," he called out, voice ringing with enthusiasm, as though inviting friends to a feast rather than enemies to a battlefield. "Let's fight to our heart's content." His eagerness was unmistakable, like a warrior who had sharpened his blade for years, now finally testing its edge. The 6 roared in response, pride flaring against fear. "You think we're afraid of you?" Even Shi Hao, who had been gravely injured, forced himself back into the fray. He swallowed several pills in one breath, his face twisting in pain as his shattered bones were forcibly set back into place. With origin power binding his body together, he could temporarily return to full strength. But these were not honorable warriors. They were survivors. In unison, they drew their weapons, blades gleaming coldly, swords, sabers. Each one positioned with precision as they formed a tight, disciplined formation. Ling Han laughed, a bold, fearless sound, and stepped forward first. With a body comparable to level 2 godly metal, what in this realm could truly threaten him? Then, impact. Peng, peng. He charged like a lion descending upon wolves, yet these wolves were cunning. None dared face him head-on. Instead, they moved like shadows, circling him, striking from the sides, blades flashing in deadly arcs. Steel clashed, energy roared, and then one sword shimmered strangely. Divine patterns pulsed along its surface, like veins of light awakening. This was no ordinary weapon. It was a god tool. Ling Han's eyes lit up with interest. This was his first encounter with such a weapon in the immortal realm. From the tip of the blade, thin strands of flame burst forth, subtle, almost delicate, yet carrying terrifying destructive force. Curious, Ling Han did not evade. He allowed a strand of flame to strike his hand. A wisp of smoke rose, a faint heat lingered. And then, nothing. No wound, no damage. He raised a brow. Even his previous body, only at the level of level 1 godly metal, might have endured this. Now, this flame could not harm him. But what if the god tool was of a higher grade? Ling Han's expression grew thoughtful. His body was strong, but not invincible. He could not afford complacency. With a flick of his hand, the Heaven Transformation Bowl appeared. Wang, divine patterns ignited upon its surface as it rose into the air, confronting the god tool. The two clashed in silent resonance. Neither suppressed the other. Ling Han sighed softly. So this was the truth. The Heaven Transformation Bowl was merely a level 1 god tool. Back in the small world, it had seemed like a treasure beyond imagination. alongside the Vial of Curses, objects that would stir envy in any heart. But here, in the immortal realm, they were only the lowest grade, and it made sense. If they had been stronger, how could he have wielded them before? With this realization, Ling Han no longer hesitated. He unleashed his techniques. The 3 styles of Black Origin flowed like ink through space. Thunderclap Ninth Heaven roared like divine judgment. Each strike, each movement, he carefully measured. Without techniques, 4-star battle prowess. With one technique, still 4-star. Only when multiple mystical arts overlapped, resonating together, did his power finally break through. 5-star, just barely. Ling Han exhaled softly. So this was the immortal realm. To surpass one's limits here was far more difficult than before. And yet, he felt a quiet satisfaction. Had he not forged himself to 20 stars before ascending, he would never have reached this height. Still, one thing remained untested: the ultimate arrow, the annihilating Dragon Star arrow. His gaze flickered. No, not here. That attack would drain every drop of power from his body. Recovery would take far too long, and these opponents were too weak. They could not force him to reveal its true limits. Then, a different thought arose. The Vial of Curses. With cold precision, Ling Han struck, wounding each of the 6. Blood was gathered, absorbed into the dark depths of the vial. Moments later, its power manifested. 1 man died instantly. 2 others screamed as their limbs rotted away, flesh decaying before their very eyes. The remaining 3 staggered, dizzy, and disoriented. Ling Han nodded slightly. As expected. Another low-grade god tool. Enough, he said calmly. The battle ended in an instant. With a surge of power, he raised his battle prowess once more. The 2 crippled men fell first, swiftly erased from existence. A single slash of his sword claimed a 3rd life. Now, only 2 remained, both at the peak of the low extreme. They exchanged a glance, and in that glance, terror. Without a word, they fled, each in a different direction. Ling Han snorted. Ha! His divine sense surged. 7-kill subduing soul technique? The man to the left froze mid-step, his mind shackled. Ling Han closed the distance in a heartbeat. His palm descended. Earth overturning seal. The man's head shattered, his consciousness extinguished instantly. But in that fleeting moment, the other had already escaped over 300 meters. Ling Han calmly drew his bow. The annihilating Dragon Star arrow trembled with restrained fury. Whoosh! The arrow flew. He did not use the ultimate arrow, yet even this was terrifying beyond measure. The fleeing man dared not turn back. Fear consumed him. His only thought was escape. But how could one outrun death? Pooh! The arrow pierced through his body, straight through the heart. He staggered, turning slowly as if wanting to speak. But no words came. Pang! His chest exploded. A swift, merciless end. Ling Han walked forward, retrieving his arrow with a faint nod. Not bad. Only now did he fully understand. The arrow itself carried divine patterns, amplifying its lethality. Back then, when it had been used against him. If not for his powerful physique, he would not be standing here today. He fell silent for a moment, then spoke softly, as though reminding himself, this is a lesson. Strength breeds arrogance, and arrogance invites death. No matter how strong his body became, he must never grow careless. Afterward, he gathered the spatial spirit tools of the fallen. His eyes widened slightly. A few hundred true origin stones. A considerable fortune. Even more pleasing, 3 pieces of spiritual meat. 2 mountain river stones. Ling Han chuckled faintly. So this is why people kill and plunder. Wealth gathered in an instant, but then his gaze deepened. As easily as you take, you may be taken. This cycle of killing had no end. He shook his head. I will not seek slaughter. But if others seek me, a faint smile appeared. They can only blame themselves. Among the spoils, the divine sword caught his eye. It suited him well, yet he did not draw it. To use it here would be to announce his deeds to the world. And in this realm, being too conspicuous was unwise. I'll test it later, he murmured. He paused, studying his surroundings. There was no sun, no moon, no clear direction. Only a world shaped by countless explorers before him, north, south, east, west, defined by memory and experience. But Ling Han had already memorized Shu Yanyu's map. After observing the terrain, he adjusted his direction. Crimson Lake, that was his destination. He began to walk, step by step, into the depths of the unknown. And then, a sound, soft, distant. Ooh! A haunting sob echoed from the dense forest, like the cry of something that should not exist. like a ghost weeping in the dark. Ling Han stopped, and the silence of the forest seemed to close in around him.